So welcome to this episode of The Wrong Conversation. Today we are going to ask what I think is one of the most important questions you can ask in life. And that question is, are you a tool? And I know that might sound like that it wouldn't be one of the most important questions you can ask, but I think by the time we're done with this video, I think that, especially by the end, I think you're going to see why I say that I think it is actually, in all seriousness, one of the most important questions you can ask.
Well, it sounds so funny, but I think it will turn very serious quick, if you want my opinion.
Agreed. Yes, absolutely. So before we jump into Are You a Tool, I just want to...
Go ahead.
So before we jump into Are You a Tool, I am David Peters. I'm here, as always, with Adrian Fiorucci, and we are here to try to uncover the wrong conversation so that we can see beyond and maybe even step beyond the wrong conversation. So we come here each week to talk about this stuff. This show is not only here on YouTube, but it's also available as a podcast. So if you are traveling and you would like to take us with you, please take us with you. We like to travel too.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we should start by just trying to draw a box around what is a tool.
We should. I agree. Yep.
Right? Because it's one of those things that you know it's an insult. Right? And you kind of have a feeling that you know what it is, but I think it's one of those words, at least I've never sat down to really think, well, what is the definition of a tool?
Right.
So I sat for hours and for hours and I contemplated this. And then after hours, I just Googled it. And then...
Of course.
It always helps just to Google it. So Google, the top thing on Google said, and I'll read it here. It says, a tool is someone who lacks the capacity to realize they are being used by someone else. Yeah. In other words, a fool. Or a pawn, or a puppet.
I think is more,
A pawn, a puppet, being used.
Again, it's as though, it's like trying to own something that you don't own, or being owned by something, maybe, right? And not realizing that that's what it is. But everybody around you can see it. I think that's the other thing, right?
Yes, that's the part of the Google definition I really like. That somebody lacks the capacity to understand that they're being used, or that they're in over their heads with something, right?
Yes,
they don't even
like
realize that they're that they're owned by it. Yeah, right. Being owned by it or being used by it. Now, the word I think is usually applied more to men than women in the popular culture. I don't think I've ever heard a woman being called a tool.
It's true.
But in our conversation, it applies. This is an equal opportunity insult, or label, even if it's not an insult. We wouldn't want to
leave anybody out, right? Exactly.
In the way we're going to talk about this, everyone has the capacity to be a tool.
Everyone is a tool. I'll go so far as to say, that's part of, including you and me, of course.
I'm going to go one step further and say that everybody wants to be or should be a tool. But we'll get to that.
Interesting. Okay.
Because how many influences are there on us that we're not that conscious of?
That's it.
Right? The culture we live in, we become...
Period. Right.
We're products of our culture, whether it be the whole culture of our nation or just the culture of our town or the culture of our family or the culture of our friend group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? All those little cultures shape us in ways that we're not that conscious of, but that we serve, but we kind of unconsciously serve that. I even think that it goes so far into the language that we use. Every language has... I love it when people will say something like, the Japanese have 20 different words for love or something. That's not accurate, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. I do.
Right. This language has, these 15 different words for love, and we only have one word. And you realize that, our understanding of the concept of love is limited by our language or expanded by our language. So we become a tool of the language that we use. Or religion's another place where people will call people a tool.
Oh, God. Sure. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who parrot the talking points but don't fully.
Oh God, it's part of why people can't, become so jaded about religion, right? Because of the hypocrisy. I guess that would be the simple, right? It's like somebody's saying all these things and espousing all these things, but then you watch them and what a tool.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah, what a tool. So there's lots of ways to be a tool, but consumerism is a big one.
You beat me to it. Yeah, that is. In our culture nowadays, especially, right? How manipulated are we? How used are we?
I remember. Well, let me get I have two things to say. One, we're filming this during the fall. Okay, so we film these a little bit ahead of time. So right now is prime fall season, and what happens in the fall? The emergence of pumpkin spice. I don't know if you see this because you don't watch that much media.
Yeah, okay.
But it's
I don't.
You go into any grocery store, at least here in California, and there's 800 different products that are pumpkin spice products.
Oh yeah.
Right, from lip gloss to cookies to ravioli, pumpkin ravioli. I mean, everything's pumpkin ravioli. And there are jokes on social media about all the people just coming out like zombies for pumpkin spice time. Right?
I love the fall. Because of pumpkin spice.
I love the fall. It's my favorite time of year. Yes, it's everyone's favorite time of year, probably.
Right.
Most likely.
I think a large majority, yeah. Yeah. And they manipulate that. They turn that into their right? I mean...
So you become a tool of the pumpkin spice lobby or the pumpkin spice advertising. Yeah. And that goes even deeper because, what are they manipulating? They're manipulating something that's already in you that responds to the fall and pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
Right? Or something, right? When I think of the fall, I think of nesting instinct, right? People just want to start eating different foods. They want to bulk up a little bit. They want to get ready for the cold weather, right? So it's like you have this idea that it's time to nest and go sit by the fire, and that's an instinct. And so they're playing off that instinct in their advertising. But are you a tool to that instinct?
Yeah. Well, and that's it, because they're like you just said, they're manipulating that. And we all know it. We all know it to a certain degree, but that's it. To what degree? Really? Do you know what I mean? And that's where it gets interesting, and that's where this conversation gets interesting, and I think it necessarily needs to go. I mean, how do you stop being a tool? It might be an interesting question as we start to go on, right? How do you stop becoming a victim of the pumpkin spice spell, of right? I mean, of like, I must get my latte, or whatever, right? Whatever that is for you. I mean, and this, we're just talking, we're talking pumpkin spice. The list is very, very long.
It's endless.
Yeah.
You said something to me years ago, a decade or more ago. We were talking and you felt a bit resentful about how sexualized billboards and advertisements had become. And you were saying this to me because they put a beautiful, for us, right, we're guys, they put a beautiful woman on an advertisement and everything's hanging out or she's in some, and so you look, but it's like, but you don't want to look, you don't want your attention to be drawn toward some random woman that's not yours, it's not your wife, it's not, but it takes control of a piece of you because there is it's just an instinct. How much of it can you stop? Right. And I remember, and so they're making you a tool just by that, and just realizing that that's happening to you. That's just one more example. It's a different side of pumpkin spice, Here's Miss Pumpkin Spice on this billboard. Right? And you gotta look because, I like Miss Pumpkin Spice, yeah.
It's an interesting, it's an interesting practice in a way. And that's probably, I don't remember having that, I don't remember saying that at all, but, I can only imagine, right? I'm working on my thing, which is my spiritual practice, right? I'm working on letting go, being in the present moment, God knows, right? And then that yanks me out in some weird way, right? Exactly. And I see it because like you just said, and I see it and it pulls me. Now it's an opportunity, of course, right? It's an opportunity to make a conscious choice to be pulled out unconscious, if that makes any sense, right? But at the same time, it can make it very challenging. I think that's part of like consumerism as the tool, as being a tool of consumerism. It's so hard now because it's so easy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just hop on your phone while you're sitting on your comfy chair and buy something, right? Or you're watching TV and that something, comes up and you're like, wow, I've been meaning to look at how much are those? And, whatever, right? The example of that. And it's so easy. So therefore, to be used as a tool is easier and easier too, if that makes any sense. That influence that they have.
There's a lot of incentives.
There is. And a lot of opportunity for them to do that with us.
The language "Are you a tool?" is not how I started this. I started with a very different, a much more serious sounding question than "Are you a tool?"
Okay.
And that I ask people when I'm doing coaching work. And to me, this is one of the big 5 questions. I don't know if there's 5, but it's certainly one of my top few questions. But that question is, how much of yourself do you truly own?
Right.
How much of yourself do you truly own? And it's a really, really uncomfortable question to answer honestly. Because like we're saying, there's a million endless ways to be a tool. And as you chart out the minutes of your day, it's very easy to see how each moment of your day is connected to something that is owning you. So the most universal thing I can think of that just drives this point home is coffee. How many people, like if I'm talking to people about coffee, what do they always say? Oh, I'm useless until I've had my cup of coffee for the day.
Okay, yeah.
There's endless memes on social media about, don't even talk to me. I haven't had my second cup of coffee yet. There's all this, right? There's a whole cultural joke about how much we all want our caffeine boost in the morning. And so I would say that that's because coffee owns a piece of you, right? You've given over ownership of a piece of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's like we're all owned by stuff. And it's not just stuff like coffee. We all have obligations to our work, our families.
Sure.
Right? And all those things own a little piece of you. Like you have an obligation. You got to show up to work or you don't get paid. Well, work owns a little bit of you. Money owns a little bit of you. The need to be there for your family, that owns a little bit of you.
I think I would assume if anybody's watched more than 2 of our things here, our show here, that they have started to realize that self-awareness always makes some sort of appearance, right? Because that's what we're talking about. How much do you own of yourself? A large part of that is self-awareness. So how self-aware are you? And then even we've also debated how self-aware can you be? There's so many things, coming in on you, and there's so much to focus on. Can you really focus on it all? What's out of your range of knowledge or knowing, right? But self-awareness is definitely the key. So in other words, how aware are you of your coffee addiction? I'm very aware of it. But I'm still a tool to my coffee. There's no doubt about it. But or how aware, that's another thing about work, right? I don't know. You got to go to work. You do. It owns a piece of you. It does. Are you really aware of that? Have you ever taken any time? Are you doing what you want to do? Might even be another level. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
I think self-awareness is a really big thing, in this
That's why I wore this shirt. That's why I wore this shirt.
Yeah, what do you got?
Today.
I didn't see it.
95, this is an actual stat that you can go read about studies about human psychology, that 95% of what's happening in our brain, it's unconscious impulses.
Yeah.
So the shirt says 95% unconscious impulses and 5% rationalization of unconscious impulses. Like that's what the brain's doing. It's 95% a robot and it's 5% trying to be like, yeah, I meant to do that. That's intentional.
Trying to pretend it's not a robot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I should have done that. I meant to do that. I should have done that. I own myself. Right. And I think that's...
I could stop drinking coffee if I wanted to. I just don't want to, Right?
Yeah, or anything like, or being unconscious impulses can be your own emotional state, like...
Oh, yeah.
Or your own interests. Like, do you choose your own interests?
Yes.
No, they choose you and they own you. You can't help what you're interested in. Do you own those? I mean, they're yours, they're in you, but who's the owner?
Yeah.
Is it the interest or is it you? Yeah.
I think we do have some control over that. And I know what you're trying to say, but I like to think anyways, that we can shift. Maybe this is what we're going to go. Maybe we're going to go into this a little bit here today, but you can't help what you're interested in. I disagree with that to an extent. I think so much of it has to do with focus. So much of it has to do with exposure. Like that was part of like when you talk about things like language or family and being a tool to these things in a way, and we are if we pay no mind to it. And why are we tools? Because of the massive amounts of exposure we have, right? We think in language, for crying out loud. So of course, if your language is limited, your thinking's limited, right? You're surrounded by your family for the first, 18, 20 years of your life. I mean, that is a huge influence on you, right? I mean, intensively surrounded, right? Anyways, does that make any sense? But we can, as we get older, we can start to shift that. I know I have. I can honestly say that, not completely, obviously, but I mean, plenty enough where my interests have changed because I've changed them, through conscious...
Well, this comes down to the part of the conversation, how do you not be a tool? Right?
Yeah,
how to not be a tool.
Yeah.
And there's I think that a lot of spiritual pursuits are about how not to be a tool, or philosophical pursuits even. I'm a big fan of the Stoic philosophers. I love the Stoics. And the Stoics are all about self-ownership, or at least ownership of your reactions and responses to the world. Being stoic means sitting back and being quiet and not getting dragged into stuff and not, sure. It's I think of a stoic as like a cow out in the rain. Like, it doesn't respond to the rain, it just sits there and keeps eating the grass, like it doesn't, and so the Stoics are like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, these guys, and you'll see them quoted a lot. And there's a real famous Epictetus quote, which is, "No man is free who is not master of himself."
I love that.
And I really like that. No man is free. And so I'm a fan of the Stoics because I'm just so incredibly aware of how much of a tool I am to so many things.
Right.
Like, I don't have a lot of pride in my willpower. Everyone's like, "Did you see the new Game of Thrones?" No. Because, what are there, 8 seasons? And I don't know how many episodes are in a season and how long is each episode. It's going to own a week of my life if I turn it, because I will be owned by it. There's no question. Right. I don't have the power to not be interested in it.
Sure, right? Yeah.
So I try not to turn it on just because I don't trust myself and my ability to own myself against these things.
You're talking about exposure too, which I just said.
Yes.
Which is interesting. It just watch what you expose yourself to.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
a definite
point 1 of how to not be a tool.
Yes. Yeah. Well, understand that you are naturally a tool, and that you can't help but be, because 95% unconscious impulses, and then the rest of you is just trying to figure out why. Right. So, all of these forces, like I said, your culture and your language, your family culture, all these things make a tool out of you. So you have to. Exposure is I love that word, exposure.
I like the word forces. There's all these forces on you. That's really pushing and pulling, you go ahead with the exposure.
No, I love the word exposure. When I'm talking to people, like when I'm coaching people, one of my big things I talk to people about, and it sounds really coachy too, it's kind of a overly coachy title that tries to make a simple thing sound fancy, but I call it circumstance design.
Yeah,
right.
You've talked to me about that. Yeah,
where you are a tool of your circumstances. So if you want to not be a tool to certain things, then try to take it out of your environment. Try to not expose yourself to it. Right. It's all about changing your incentive structures. Surround yourself with incentive structures that take you where you want to go, that don't make you a tool to things that you don't want to be a tool of. Right.
Right. No, I know. Like, you take something like somebody has a hard time sleeping, or, let's just stay with that simple one. A lot of times it's like, okay, first of all, make sure you got some physical activity for the day, because if a lot of people don't anymore, right? So they're sitting around all day and their bodies aren't as tired, their minds are very tired. But then to wind their mind down, they spend all kinds of screen time, which actually in a strange way doesn't, right? Doesn't do that for you as like you think it does. It's proven. So get away from the screen, do it, make your circumstances different. Those two things could change your sleep habits if you're challenged with that, just by what you're exposing yourself to or not exposing yourself to.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
That's what my wife does every night. She turns off the computer, or if she's watching something, she puts on these like blue light blocking things, because it just changes your physiology, right?
Yeah.
What the color of the light is,
Yeah.
So she'll do that, and then she'll put down the computer, and she'll either just sit quietly and drink some tea, or she'll read a book, or we'll talk, or something.
Right.
And there's certain topics at night that we don't talk about, because
That's right.
if I bring up a contentious thing or something I'm worried about, then that anxiety, she's a tool to my energy if I'm anxious
Yeah.
about something.
Yeah.
So if we're going to have a conversation about a difficult subject, we will only have it earlier in the day when there's time to release it, because we have an understanding that we're going to be a tool to that energy, to that anxiety.
You have
or that topic.
awareness. You have self-awareness enough about that,
Yeah.
I already quoted this once before, I'm pretty sure, in a video, but I think it's appropriate again here too, which is that Mark Twain quoted that it isn't the things that you don't know that'll kill you, it's the things that you know for sure that ain't true, right? Those are the things that'll get you. So if you don't realize you're a tool, if you don't realize that you're 95% unconscious, right, urges or whatever, that is dangerous, because you're running under the guise of autonomy when it's anything but. And why is it dangerous? Because there's never any way out until you realize, wait a minute, I'm a tool? Right? Not a fun thing to look at, but if you don't go there. I think another what this makes me want to talk about for a minute too is the usefulness, and it's a word that you use a lot. I'm going to put these two words that you use a lot together. The posture of humility. I mean, this is sort of an antidote. In other words, this comes to that quote. I mean, if you could see that, right? It's like, if you think you know, that's when there's the problem. That's when you're going to become a tool, right? But if you can remain humble and go, gee, I might not know, or am I being, stay open, stay questioning, be humble. You don't maybe know all the answers, right? That's going to be the first and probably best antidote to being a tool, That's probably why it's so important. I don't know, does that make any sense, David?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would go even further to say, understand that you're definitely a tool. And the question isn't just am I being one, it's to what am I being one. I like just understand, because we talked about so much of it is unconscious. You just accept ahead of time that there's something that's unconsciously pulling the strings. So instead of even saying, is something pulling on my strings, I would just start by saying, okay, stuff's pulling on my strings, like everybody. What's pulling on them most, or what strings don't I want this thing to be pulling on? Or what don't I want pulling on my strings? Because something's going to, exposure.
Here leads me to my next thing that I would really like to share about this, another how to not be a tool, I feel like. One, that's the first step. Well, first is self-awareness, to be aware that you are. I think you've stated that very clearly, right? How could you not be? This isn't a judgment really anymore, right? It's like there's so many influences, right? So, and then tools, that's self-aware. Then to actually take on a little humility would be really useful for you to be able to see how. Then I would say, let's step beyond that though. Let's move further into, okay, if I'm under influence, if there's all these forces all the time, maybe, and this is what I can say I personally know that I've worked on and work on. What do I surround myself with? Where do I place my focus? And what I mean by this too is to pick best you can what you're serving. And in my opinion, that's always going to be best by picking something much higher than you, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times back in the day, that used to be religion for us, in a way. It would be like, like you're trying to be good all the time and to live up to this ideal that religion put out before us. Those days are kind of gone. There's a lot of things that make me sad about that too, by the way, because then it's just, where we live now, it's just me for the most part. You have the right to get, whatever you want, and you should, and do it. But what you don't realize when you're doing that is that you're a tool to all your own desires, and you're being manipulated by all these outside forces because you're just pursuing whatever it is you want to do and whatever you feel. A higher ideal is very, very useful. And it doesn't have to be God. It doesn't have to be religion. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But something higher is a really good... Does that make any sense to you, David?
I love it. In fact, that's why... What you just said is why I think this is one of the most important conversations you can have with yourself, or one of the most. How much of yourself do you truly own? The honest answer is very little.
Right.
So, okay, that sounds kind of depressing.
Yeah.
But what you said is the answer. What owns you?
Yeah. Pick it.
What are you serving? Freedom isn't about removing ownership. You don't have freedom from ownership. You have freedom over slowly deciding what does own you, what you're going to be owned by. And that is what I really think the game of life or development or spirituality is about. Something's going to own me. There's a Bob Dylan song. Again, I'm going to quote my Bob Dylan songs. Bob Dylan went through a period, I think in the 80s, where everyone calls it like his born again Christian stage, right? He released a super Christian album, and everyone's like, Bob Dylan goes Christian, but he's Jewish, and he was like the counterculture guy in the 60s. But he has a song that always stuck in my head called "You Gotta Serve Somebody."
Yeah, I love that song,
right.
Actually.
And he goes through a list. You can be a super rich finance guy, you can be the president, you can be all this, you can be a monk, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. And it's this kind of a religious song, but he just talks about how nobody escapes service.
That's it.
To something. And
so choose as wisely as you can.
Yes, that is. And that's the game, right? And that's why I said at the very beginning, are you a tool? Yes. Do you want to be? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who are you if you're not serving something? Who are you? Why are you even here if you're not serving anything? If you serve nothing? Yeah. The nihilists. Yeah. We believe in nothing, from the Big Lebowski. Anyway. Just think about the nihilists. But they didn't serve nothing. They served the idea of being seduced by the idea of nihilism. That's what they were tools to.
Exactly.
Right?
This made me, when I was thinking about this a little bit prior, exactly. Most people don't even realize how deep this goes in silly ways, right? I mean, if you're rebelling against anything, you're a tool. Because whatever you're rebelling against owns you. What are you without that thing to rebel against? Right? I mean, as an example, it's a simple little thing that most people, it eludes them. Now, they could see it in somebody else, but they typically don't see it in themselves when they're doing it. You know what I mean? That's another one of those political things, right? Everybody can see the other side and what a tool they are by their side, from their side, and how they're being used and how they're brainwashed, but they can't see how they are being that way from their side, And that's where humility comes in, that's
I think about it in politics all the time when one side erupts over I'm going to use a concrete example because it was so extreme, but the Donald Trump phenomenon, right? I mean, I'm going to ignore the love of him. I'm going to go right into the hatred of him because the hatred of him was so strong, right? The people who didn't like him hated him, right? But I always, whenever I saw them hate him, I mean, I got why they hated him. I mean, he was easy to dislike on lots of levels.
I think he got off on that, actually.
Yes, because why? Because he owned those people.
Yes.
Because he owned that hatred. And that's what people didn't see. They got so wrapped up in hating him, they didn't realize that they were giving over ownership of themselves to Trump. Right?
I hope this makes the cut because this is really, really important. Yeah. And I don't care whatever side you're on. Like,
it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Biden. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever you're trying to serve, if you're serving it that way, you're losing. because the thing you're fighting against owns you.
Yes.
That's so important.
Yeah. What you hate owns you. What you hate owns you. Yeah. What angers you owns you. The people that bother you and get under your skin, they own you.
That's right.
Not completely. They just own a piece.
Well, it depends on how much your hatred is.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can completely overwhelm. Yeah, I've seen it just completely, yeah.
Whether it's politics, whether it's divorce. Have you ever seen that in divorce?
Yeah.
People love their kids, but somehow they'll get thrown under the bus because of the hatred of the other person. And they love their kids. Of course they love and they both will do it. This isn't a male-female. This is like,
At some level, it's impossible to avoid, but these are all questions of degree, as we always talk about, right? It's not...
Yeah.
We talked about this with empathy. It's not so much how much empathy you have. It's where your empathy is allocated, where it's focused, and it's the same thing with ownership. It's not that whether you are or aren't owned. You are. I'm sorry, you're owned. But it's what owns you. It's what you serve that makes all the difference in the world. And I think that goes back to your point about exposure. You can choose what you're exposed to. Therefore, you can choose what you involuntarily give up ownership of yourself to.
Right. I know that you know this about me. I think I've mentioned in some of our talks that I'm very political, right? Like that's something that I just not something I involve myself in, and that's going to probably stir up some problems with some people as they hear that. But and one of the big shifts, actually I wouldn't even call it a big shift, but it was the beginning of a real shift in my life. Where when you look back with the beauty of hindsight, and you can look at your life and you say, ooh, from there it started to shift, right? Something started to go a different way, was when I stopped consuming so much news. Because I used to be a big consumer of news, and I realized it just worked me up. I really wasn't doing much of anything different about all this stuff I was consuming. Like it really wasn't changing what I did with my life. This is just for me. I'm not trying to judge anybody else. And then when I saw it so clearly, though, I saw it very clearly, I was like, ooh, let me just stop. Cold turkey, right, for a minute. And wow, the benefits were huge for me personally. And one of the reasons was because my exposure changed, right? So in other words, I was exposing myself to all this, and then I started exposing myself to something else because all that time that took up in my life, right? Actually, David, what it did, I always involved myself in spirituality, but it gave me way more time to expose myself to deeper concepts, to something that was more that I started to use and utilize that did start making me behave different in my life, if that makes any difference, or it makes any sense, right? And that shifted.
There are things that can own you that serve you. Right, it's good that you're owned by certain things.
Right.
This is why it was kind of trying to be funny line in our talk on marriage, but I said that marriage is prison on purpose.
Right.
So the prison part sounds like, oh, it's prison, marriage is prison, but it's prison on purpose because maybe it's good for you to be in that box.
Yeah.
Maybe it puts borders around your life or gives you a container to live in that actually serves you. And that you want to be owned by your marriage. If you can make a good marriage, then you want to be owned by it because it actually is really good for you.
Right. I love that melding. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think that's exactly what you're saying with spirituality. That as soon as what you were talking about with the politics is something I've definitely been a tool of politics. I mean, really deeply a tool of it. I really get caught up in it. And about a year ago, I just said, you know what, I'm not going to watch anymore. And I just shut it off for a couple months. And I did get happier. I just got happier.
Oh, yeah, that happened for me.
I spent more time. and then there's been a lot going on. So then recently I've been sucked back into it.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'll find myself, I'll walk in, I'll start talking to my wife, and something that's political will come up because it's in the air. And then, there's a lot of issues that do affect us. So we'll talk about something. But then all of a sudden I'll find myself on a 10-minute rant about something unrelated. And then I'll wake up. I'll wake up.
Ooh.
Because I was unconsciously just tool mouthing. I was just puppeting something that upset me that I saw on the news. And then I'll see in my wife's face that she's just like, whoa, I don't want to go there. Don't
glaze
take
over.
me there. Yeah, but not even a glaze over, like an avoidance. Like I don't like yes, that subject will own a piece of me too if I allow it, and you're trying to pull me in. Please don't pull me in.
Yeah.
And then because I'm a tool, I'll say, but this is important. This is about what's going on. You're right? And then she'll say, well, what am I going to do about it? Like really? Like getting upset about this? What's it going to change about my day? Like I'll worry about it when it will change something about my day. Like if I'm actually wondering who to vote for once every few years, then I'll pay attention for an hour and a half and I'll figure out who I want to vote for. But beyond that, do I need to spend 2 or 4 years just being wrapped up in the fight that isn't going to change what my role in the fight is,
Right.
And it's and to me that's just deeply practically beautiful. Like it's exposure again. It's circumstance design again.
It is, and you said it so beautiful. And I woke up. Then I'll wake up. That's what you said. Then I'll wake up. Yeah. I think this is some of the usefulness of being a tool too. By the way, to me personally, the ultimate goal is to wake up as much as humanly possible. Right, to own as much of yourself as possible. And I don't really love those terms, those words so much, but I mean, I know what you mean by that. And to be fully aware to be aware as much as humanly possible. Right, to wake up, and that's part of what's useful about being a tool in a way, though. Right, it's like that. It's like that experience of sleeping, so that you know what waking up is like. If that makes any sense, right? It's like, I got caught up in that dream of who I am, or you know what I mean? The 5% of me that's trying to make excuses for why the 95% of me is doing these things, right? You know what I mean? That's a wake up, though. When you realize, all of a sudden say, wow, actually I've been a tool, that's a powerful moment. That sets you up well. It's not always pleasant, but it sets you up well for the future to see the next time that happens. I mean, again, this is what I would call freedom or steps towards freedom.
It does make sense, and I really love that you use the word freedom, right? Because that's what I think that's what people are really looking for, right? They want to feel free in their lives, right? They want to be free from being a tool. Or something like that, or at least they want to feel free about it. And there is a path to freedom, but it's not about not being a tool. It is about, you don't have a freedom, you can't find freedom from being a tool, but you can find freedom in choosing what you're a tool for. Right? And then you talked about, or you kind of, the waking up part. And there was a quote I saw, and I don't it's an Eastern quote, but I don't know who did the quote, but it was stupid before awakening, stupid after awakening, but now you know. But now you know it. But now you're awake to the fact that you're stupid. Either way, you're stupid. Either way, you're a tool. But once you're awake, you know you're a tool. And once you know you're a tool, and once you really accept that you're going to be a tool, then you can get on to what actually works and what actually brings you freedom, which is your freedom to choose what you're a tool for, or what you serve is another way.
I think that once you do that, though, I think it has to shift. I mean, if we take the definition that you put forth or Google put forth for us, you're no longer ignorant of it. So I get what you're saying, of course, right? But it's like you need a different word now, almost, because now you've taken that away. It can't be tool, because tool relied upon unconsciousness of not knowing that you're being used. Once you know, it's something of a totally different order. It might not be that much different, by the way. That's what that quote is great, right? I mean, it's like, you're stupid either way, but now there's something different in there. I don't know.
Yeah,
do you feel that in your life ever?
No, I do. I love that. I love that you made that. I love that you separated those two, because a tool does rely on your ignorance. Right? Or your lack of awareness. And then awareness, it turns from being a tool into just, well, what are you knowingly serving? Like you're awake to what you're serving.
Yeah.
and you can become more and more and more and more awake to what you're serving, and that's the goal. Not serving something.
Yeah,
right? You're going to have to serve somebody, and you should, because it's good for you, right? Like in marriage, serve the marriage. It's good for you.
That's right.
Spirituality. When you served spirituality, there was more of you. You got more freedom. You had more energy. Right. Another thing, my wife mentioned just about freedom and serving was, she just talked about, like, if you're working in a job, right? You serve the job. You're a tool to the job or whatever you're working for. It owns a piece of you. But if you become really, really good at your job, then you become kind of indispensable at the job.
Yeah.
Right? Then all of a sudden, like, you own a piece of them as well, because they need you and you need them. And suddenly the power dynamic shifts, and there's more of a healthy back and forth co-ownership.
Yeah. I love that. That's so true.
And because of that, there's real freedom. And so it's almost like the way to get more freedom is to really, really serve the thing that owns you well and consciously.
Yeah.
Which almost seems backwards. It's a counterintuitive thing.
Yeah, it is a counterintuitive.
You don't want work to own you. Go do a really good job at work.
Right. In spirit, exactly. And I'm going to take it to, to the really deep level here, but I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. In spirituality, in most religion, you want freedom, surrender.
There you go.
It's like, what? It's to talk about counterintuitive, right? But I mean, I don't know if that's a really tough juxtaposition, but to me, I see the parallel there. I think your wife is spot on. Well, the other thing I would say that's a little more approachable is that, people are so enticed by entrepreneurship because they feel like they're going to own it. But any entrepreneur, because I know you are one, and I've been one all of our adult life pretty much, it owns you. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love that saying of, like, an entrepreneur will work 70 hours a week to avoid working a 40-hour week, right? I mean, that's the famous thing, right? I mean, but that's it, though, because you feel like you own it because it's yours. But there's a playing back and forth.
It owns you,
there.
but you've managed to own it by choice. Right? You've decided to be owned by it, and that's why you love it.
Right.
You said this at the very beginning of this conversation, and I wanted to jump ahead so badly, but you say, do you love what you're doing?
Yeah.
Right? You're going to work, but do you love your work? Do you love what you're doing? You're going to serve something, but do you love what you serve? And does it love you back?
Right.
And it's so big. So you're talking about going to a deep place where you're talking about surrender. Right, to get ownership. Well, let me just stop on that for a minute, because actually that was a really good point. Surrender because you're owned anyway, and the fact that you're trying not to surrender, and that you're fighting surrendering, is just spending energy that is going to get wasted because you can't fully remove yourself from service of something.
That's right.
Right? And so by surrendering, it's not that it really changes your circumstances all that much on the ground. You're still serving. But by surrendering, you're no longer wasting all that energy fighting it. And therefore, surrendering gives you energy and allows you to become more aware and be less of a tool.
Yes. Exactly. It changes your relationship to it.
Yes.
It changes your relationship to reality. Because reality is, there's all kinds of forces. There's a million things that are so far out of your control. And and people always think of surrender as giving up. And that's the funny thing, that's where the big misunderstanding. Just like vulnerability is often thought of as weakness, right? As weakness. Yeah. Surrender is not giving up. It is actually exactly what you just said. It's becoming aware.
It's allowing it to be what it already is.
What it already is. And that changes your relationship to it, which completely changes your reality, actually. Even though, like your experience, that's what I'm trying to say. It completely changes your experience of that reality. Does that make sense?
It changes your relationship. Yeah. And your relationship is everything. The quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. Not just with other people, but with the world, with everything, with your ideas. Yeah. Are you a tool to things? The basic point, though, is, I think, just to bring it back down, is that you are going to serve something.
Yeah.
you are going to serve an idea. You are gonna serve a political idea. You're gonna serve a spiritual idea. You're gonna serve what you believe that the world is. Do you believe it's a not a circumstance, but a random act of randomness in space? It just kind of happened, or do you believe it's intelligent design of the universe? I mean, that's just an idea, but which one you serve completely changes your relationship with your life.
It does. It's like the conversation you're having.
It's like the conversation
are constantly
you're having.
going back. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It changes.
It defines the
changes.
Conversation you're.
Yes, and there's lots of different things that can own you, but it's really important to start thinking about how to choose, how to become more aware, and then to become more able to choose what owns you. And I think that's going back to what you said before. We talked about circumstance design and exposure, but you want to be owned by something. You don't want to just own yourself. What are you living for then if you're just living for yourself, right? Because if you just are owned only by yourself, then you're living only for yourself. And then, well, then who are you? Like not what use are you, but I think we all have an intuition that kind of goes against why we're here.
Yeah.
Right.
When you see somebody who's living that way, it's always kind of like, ooh, right? I mean,
you just have a reaction that it's like, ugh.
Yeah. Meanwhile, when you meet somebody who's serving, whose whole life is about service, you're immediately attracted to that person too. You're like, what a beautiful person. I love that person.
Yes.
They're so, I think that the simple way to be able to determine the difference there,
because they're awake enough to consciously choose what they're serving, and then they choose something to serve that is universally admirable. We all know serves the good, whatever that is, right? However you want to define that, but we all know what it is intuitively, and we can see when somebody's, not just when someone's choosing to serve it, but when they're awake enough to do it effectively.
Yeah.
That's really compelling. I mean, that's every hero in every movie, right? And it's not just that they're powerful enough to serve the good, but they're awake to what the good is. And they're not a tool of some lesser noise. Right. They have a North Star, and their connection to it is pretty pure, right? Yeah. And they do serve it, and they humbly serve it, and they bow before it.
Yeah.
Right? But because of that, they get power. Because of that, they receive the love back. Because of that, it takes care of them because they're taking care of it, right? There's a mutually beneficial ownership of those two things. And
can I say something really quick too? I just want to interject here because I think it's an important point that I was thinking about and I hadn't made it yet, and you just doing it for me in a way, or you're leading there. Mm-hmm. The compass, the North Star. Part of what's useful for having something like that, the thing is, the drive is pure, you said, like the pursuit of that thing is pure, but it's also deep, right? Like it goes, and that's what I work on constantly, like trying to make that deeper within me, because we all need course correction. I mean, and that's because we're always a tool of someone, like something's influencing, you get off. But when we have a deep connection to this North Star and something that's higher than us, quite a bit higher, so that it's pulling us, it helps us with the course correction. All of a sudden we start to feel, ooh, I'm getting off base here. I could tell. You wake up. My wife's showing me signals that she's not listening to me anymore because I've gone way off the rails. You know what I mean? But you also are aware enough. You have something inside of you that values that, David, enough to say, wait a minute. And it wakes you up. And you say, gosh, I just went off too much, didn't I, honey? Yeah. Right. And it's useful having that North Star for the course correction, I think, is really a powerful part. Because we're always going to fall victim to being a tool. And that, like you said it many times now, right? You can't avoid it. But you do need, it's like what we always talk about too. It's not about answers. It's about a process. That's the process. The course correction, right, Dave? The
constant course correction. Yeah, the constant course correction.
Yeah, exactly.
We were just talking about a minute ago. So we're talking about that people who are serving that deeper thing are attractive. We're drawn to them. We know when it's good. You know, just for everyone at home who's watching a video like this or listening to a podcast like this because they want some tips and tricks about life on the ground. I was attracted to my wife first and foremost because she was not a tool, right? Of common things, right? And so practicing this has real consequences on the ground just for who you can befriend and who you can partner with. I remember the first moment that things turned between my wife and I is we knew that we were kind of interested in each other, but we didn't have much to hang on to yet. We didn't know what we had in common yet because it didn't seem like we had much, but we were just kind of hanging in to see, oh, there's something here, but we don't know what.
You could feel it intuitively. You knew something was there.
We felt it, but there was nothing. There was no proof. There was no evidence yet. Like we didn't know what we were feeling.
Yeah.
And then we got into a political conversation about a subject that we both kind of assumed we thought one thing, and we both discovered we thought the opposite thing.
Okay.
But then we thought some other thing that seems like it was from the other side, and we realized that we both had these kind of heterodox mix of views that my wife comments because she's not from America, right? So one of the things that surprised her, and she still talks about it today, she goes, "Why do all of these ideas come in packages? Like if you're on the blue team, you have to believe all the blue team things. And if you're on the red team, you believe all the red team things." I mean, there's reasons why those issues trickle into each other. There's reasons why they tend to bunch up, but there's not a reason for them to bunch up as severely as they seem to. Sure. And she goes, "I don't even understand. Like, it's just not a concept that makes sense to me. Why, if I believe in this, I'm also supposed to believe in this? Because I don't."
Right.
And I loved her for that. I loved her. I said, "Oh my God, you're actually thinking about these subjects. You're not a tool."
Right.
Like you're actually sitting and saying, what do I think about this issue versus this issue versus this issue? And she's not interested in taking the prescribed dose from red team, blue team, purple team, no team. Like she just isn't interested in she's just confounded by the fact that they're even grouped together. I found it so attractive. I thought to myself, I really, really want a free thinker. I want an individual soul. I want an autonomous human being who owns themselves or owns their thoughts to that degree.
Who's
and
authentic.
I married the woman.
Is that word?
Yes,
right?
authentic. Yeah. There you go. She was authentic, and she didn't care about.
Definitely.
She is authentic, and it was sexy. Is what I'm trying to point to people. Like if you're really owned by these things, you simply put, you're less attractive. You're less attractive to the people who you really want to pair up with. You're less attractive to the awake and to the aware. You're less attractive to non-tools.
Right, exactly. Right. And if you're interested in how to not be one, that's a great pointer. You know, to take that yet just a little bit further, it's pretty much exactly in the same realm, but all spiritual practices or religions will at some point tell you that you need to be mindful of who you surround yourself with. And you made a conscious choice to surround yourself around this woman because she was authentic, like you're saying, because she was a free thinker, because she was, it's kind of a duh, right? We all know this, but we don't pay close enough attention. And if you don't want to be a tool, pay attention to the people you surround yourself with. Are they? Because it's going to have a massive impact on whether you are or are not. It couldn't get more on the ground than that, too. And it's a challenging thing. By the way, this is a tall order. I'm not trying to make it sound too easy, because you've probably been with these people a lot for a long time, I should say. And that's a tough thing to change. But if you're really interested in more autonomy, in more authenticity, and more freedom, you got to be mindful of that. That is an incredibly important thing, who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, so if you are a tool and you're trying to remove yourself from that, like you said, you have to kind of watch who you're around, watch what you're watching. That just means removing all of the parts of your day that might fill your day, and that can be kind of a lonely feeling for a while. But if you can get through that and then find what's on the other side of being a tool, it's much less lonely to not be a tool. Sure. Right, but there's like a barrier to entry that you have to get through, which is it's kind of lonely there for a while.
It is. Yeah,
And so
it
hard
kind
thing
of comes
to
down to
do.
that
Yeah.
law of attraction thing too, right? Until something else is because you are surrounding yourself around, this is what you're attracting, so to speak. Until you shift that and then start to attract other things, you will probably experience this moment of loneliness. And it could be a little while until you find your place in that, and people find you, so to speak, you know?
Well, and this leads to kind of an important how-to point, right?
Okay.
So we talk with people not just to talk about ideas, but how to integrate these ideas. And this is something my wife said, because she's really good at saying these things. That if you want to not be a tool, you want to start taking more ownership of yourself or deciding what owns you more. You don't just go in and it's not something that happens all at once. And she likened it to, like, she used the analogy of dieting. If you want to change your diet, you don't just go in, or if you want to stop smoking, here's an even better one. If you want to stop smoking, you don't just stop smoking, right? It's really, really hard to do. What you do is you replace smoking.
Yes.
Right? So now you chew gum, or you do an e-cigarette, or you do something else that gives you all the signals that you need, right? The part of you that is addicted is owned by the addiction. So you can't just remove it from yourself, but you can replace it with something that's better for you. So it's the same with dieting. It's like if you're going to remove ice cream from your diet, you're still going to want a sugar hit. So you start by replacing ice cream with a plate of grapes or an apple. So you still get a little bit of a hit. There's still something in place, right? So that's why. So you don't just get rid of ownership. You one thing at a time. You take, okay, the news owns me. Instead of the news tonight, I'm going to read a book.
Right. Right.
I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to call my friend.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, if
But
you
I'm
think
still
about that
gonna do
example
something.
that I used, it's not that I stopped listening to stuff completely. I shifted
Yeah.
what I listened to. You know what I mean? So instead of news, it was other material. It was self-help. It was, you know what I mean? It was self-improvement stuff. It was spiritual stuff. I couldn't agree more, by the way, David. It's a really powerful point that is universal. It doesn't matter what you're talking about,
Of
right?
changing anything.
Of changing anything. Exactly. That's a really powerful point.
So to make this point even more powerful, this is the most powerful point I'm going to make in this whole video. Here comes the snark. I can't stop my grin. I was going to try to keep a real straight face. Stop watching the news and start watching the wrong conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
It will be
after
better
you're
for
done-
you.
Exactly.
It won't be
We're
as
gonna
titillating.
we won't manipulate you quite as much. I mean, and
Buy this
after-
shirt.
here-
Buy this shirt. Yeah.
No, I'm going to go right into it too. And after you're done, make sure that you comment and that you like the video and that you subscribe and follow us, because that's the natural,
Notifications, please. Notifications. Let us own that little ding, that little alarm ding that comes and tells you, here we are.
Yes.
Please give us some
Yes.
ownership over your day. Yeah. Let us own 5 minutes of your time. Leave us a review. That would change our lives, right?
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would be
Give us
fantastic.
ownership over 5 minutes
But here's
of
the
one
thing:
day.
do it consciously, and then you won't be a tool.
There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do
You'll
it
just
very
be serving.
consciously.
You'll just be
You'll
serving
be serving
something.
something higher.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that works. I don't know.
I think
Yeah.
that's what there is to say on being a tool, I think.
Yeah.
For now,
Well,
at least. That's step one.
For now, I think we've said enough. Yeah, I think
We've said enough. Yeah, yes, you are a tool somewhere. We all are. It's not a judgment. It's just a reality
Right.
of being. Right? It's okay.
Right.
But don't stay asleep. Wake up. Look at how much. Watch yourself. Watch yourself react to the news, to your friends, to your boss, to your family, to the culture, to the language, to everything around you, right? To pumpkin spice.
To pumpkin spice. Here's a great trigger for that too, if you want my opinion. You see it in somebody else. We all do. It's easier to see it in somebody else. The moment you see it in somebody else, take a moment and ask yourself, where am I like that?
Yeah.
That's a useful because the truth is there's somewhere. And it's easy to see. It's harder to see for ourselves. But if you take that opportunity, that's something that I do a lot, like with that, like you see somebody be judgmental, you're like, man, that person's being really judgmental. Oh, well, maybe I'm being judgmental. And where am I being judgmental?
You can also read it in how people respond to you. So if you're talking and you're just not getting anywhere with somebody, we talk about being in the wrong conversation.
Yeah.
If it can be the wrong conversation because you're being a tool. And people can smell toolness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your toolicity, or whatever you call it.
I love
your
this.
toolness.
See, we're stepping out. We're freeing ourselves from language by creating our own languages.
People will know when you're spouting a talking point versus when you're speaking from the heart. Even if you're saying the same thing, you could be making the same point, but people will know whether you're making it with somebody else's words or with your own. So it's not that you have to be right or not believe what you believe. Right? Like you're a tool to forces in the world because you relate to them or you agree with them or something. Fine. That's not the problem. The problem is the lack of consciousness to how much it's owning you and you are acting on its behalf instead of on your own. And how asleep you are to it. And we're all still asleep to a lot of that stuff. Again, it's just a matter of degree. It's slowly peeling back the layers of the onion, replacing one little piece at a time. And doing it as consciously as you can, and forgiving yourself for being a tool, but understanding that the more ownership that you can reclaim, not that it's yours, but that you can have the freedom to choose what owns it. That is your only true freedom, I think.
I agree, and this leads us into next week's conversation. I feel like I really do, because if you want to change, you should be asking yourself, or you might want to take a moment to ask, are you ripe? Are you ripe for the change that you want to see? I think that's a really, I'm excited about that talk, and I think that's what we're going to be doing next week, right, David?
I love it. I'm really excited for that one, and how to determine how ripe you are and how to become more ripe. Oh, it's going to be good. It's going to be good.
I think so. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
I really do think it segues good into what we've just been talking about. So,
I agree.
All right.
Well, I'll see you next week, you tool.
All right, David. Thank you. I'm going to work on that. Maybe by next time you won't feel the need to call me that.
I won't be such a tool to my need to call you a tool. To put myself one step above. Yeah. All right, my friend.
Have a good
soon.
one. Enjoy it.